So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about ego and the unconscious and shadow. The Jungian concept of the shadow is something that fascinates people, and I'm often asked what kind of shadow work I recommend. Jung defined the shadow as that part of our unconscious. It's different to his colleague and mentor Freud's concept of the unconscious. For Jung, it was much more to do with disavowal and much more to do with parts of ourselves that we were in denial of that could then potentially come back and possess us. Freud had a similar concept, a similar version of the unconscious, but his was more neurosis focused. The interesting thing about both of these guys is they both had aspirations to be archaeologists at certain points in their lives. And I think psychoanalytic theory that they created, which is really an exploration of the unconscious and really an exploration of the human ego, the worst elements of it in many ways, is kind of archaeological. It's focused on the past. It's focused on sigils and symbols and magic and hieroglyphics. It's focused on history and doing a forensic analysis of history. And it's focused on crypts, that which is down, that which is dead, that which is buried, and that which is hidden in the darkness beneath the earth. So in a certain sense, strictly speaking, that makes both Freud and Jung occultists. They're occultists. The occult is that which is hidden, is that which is in the earth. So people will say to me, well, you know, what shadow work do you recommend? And I'm like, well, Jung didn't really give us a specific protocol for self-individuation and for integrating the shadow. He never used the term shadow work, to the best of my knowledge. I can't find a source for shadow work, and I was thinking, where's this come from? The only times that you would put shadow and work together is in boxing. So you have shadow boxing and bag work, which are both ways of getting yourself trained for something. But I imagine it's a semi-modern Americanism. So there's no protocol for integrating the shadow. There's no protocol, no strict Jungian protocol for doing this. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. The ego, similarly, holds elements of our disavowed parts of ourselves, the disavowed drives, our instincts, our thoughts, our lusts, our desires that don't conform with our ego ideal, and we say no to, and we push it away. That which we say no to, and we push away. That's to disavow, to banish. So no, that is not me. Something comes up inside of you, really is you, really did come from you, and you say, no, I don't like it. I don't like it, so no, it is not me. That's important. It will be important for reasons I'll give you in a moment. What does the ego in this context do when we're talking about the ego, the unconscious and shadow and the danger that lies there? So if you have a healthy ego, there's different ways of using the term ego. So in the spiritual tradition that we've absorbed largely from the East, Middle East to the Far East, that we have absorbed in the quote-unquote West, we use the word ego, but this is a mistranslation of many words from many different languages, which I'll touch on in just a moment. A healthy ego would be you have healthy boundaries. You have a healthy regard for yourself, a healthy regard for other people. You can distinguish between your needs and another person's needs. You can respect and cater to your own needs, and you can identify and respect and cater to other people's needs within a boundaried structure, more or less, roughly speaking. You know the difference internally between your thoughts and your feelings. You know the difference between a scientifically, rigorously, rationally gathered fact and a dodgy memory or an emotion-backed impulse to believe something, a confabulation, if you like. And that's a fairly healthy ego. That's psychology. So psychology has the potential for a healthy functioning ego. And I don't think that that's a useless concept. I think that's a good concept. Yes, there is something called a healthy ego, in the same way that in psychology we can have healthy narcissism. It's a Freudian concept, like a child should go through a period of narcissism and then they should grow out of it. And we as adults should maintain a degree of narcissism. Healthy narcissism is not exploitative and it's not abusive. It becomes that when infected with ego and the shadow and certain parts of the unconscious, which I'm coming to. So in the Eastern traditions that we have, let's keep it simple rather than looking at like Jewish and Arabic concepts of ego, which there are, and there are useful concepts there. Let's keep this video short-ish. Let's jump straight to the further east, Southeast Asia. So in Sanskrit, in the Vedic traditions, when they spoke of the ego, they spoke of it as being like a machine. It's very scientific. It's got a very modern feel to it, the Vedic tradition, and particularly Vedic psychology, Buddhism, notions of desire, notions of really the human self, the personality and human psychology and human instinct. It's complex and it's nuanced and it's very, very subtle. Well worth looking into if you have time. They call the Sanskrit word for ego in the Vedic traditions is ahamkara, which means the I am maker, or the self-maker, or the part of ourselves that tells the story back to us of who we are, and then tells that story to other people. Hold on to that. Where do we go wrong? Where's the danger? Where's the problem in normal life? And there is no doubt that you have people around you who suffer from this problem. So there is a denial and there is a storytelling problem here. And this generates sometimes exploitation and abuse, like narcissistic abuse. And sometimes it's just very self-defeating to the person themselves. And that's far more common. Have you ever been locked? Well, I would say Freudian slip there, really. Have you ever been locked into a conversation with somebody and it's quite boring? You should never feel locked into a conversation. So if you feel locked into a conversation, obviously it's boring. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation with someone and it almost hurts? It's so boring. Like and I'm not trying to be comedic. That is quite funny actually, but I'm not trying to be comedic. You feel it in your body. You feel it somatically. It's like, wow, I'm being hit with some numbing agent that suppresses my joy and makes me feel trapped and sort of is draining me, and I'm grey and stuck in this grey, repetitive, boring, robot-like energy. Have you ever had that? When I was a kid and I used to look at adults, especially adults who'd gotten up to like middle age, I noticed that when they were talking to me sometimes, I'd be looking at them and going, it's really hard to listen to what you're saying because it's so boring. It's so joyless. It's so lifeless. I was watching Rick and Morty the other day, which is where I get most of my spiritual direction in life now, is from Rick and Morty. And thematically, the writers of that show come back to notions of simulation theory, like reality is a simulation, and of Gnostic, things from the Gnostic tradition. This world is not the real world. This world is not the ultimate world. The God of this world is either an evil God or a hapless, chaotic half-God, and we're kind of a mistake, and this is a source of purgatory, depending on the Gnostic tradition that you look at. And we're perfect beings of light, trapped in a corrupted flesh and suffering inside of a corrupted world. Largely speaking, most Gnostic traditions would agree with that. It's called Gnostic because the only way out is through gnosis, which is nous, your knowledge. Enlightenment sets you free, similar to the Far Eastern traditions like Zen, Taoism, Chan Buddhism. And I was watching that, and they were talking about writing. So as they're writing the stories in Rick and Morty, they satirize story writing methods, and they said there's only two types of story. They're talking to a hack writer. Rick and Morty, the protagonists, are conversing with a hacky writer. And he was like, I don't know whether my story is going to be good or bad. And Rick Sanchez, who's effectively the god of this world, a drunk, nihilistic, cynical, super genius scientist, the Demiurge, he could be the Gnostic god of this world, says, no, there's no such thing as a good or a bad story. The story is either joyful or joyless. It's not a bad measure by which to measure stories. Let's go back. Have you ever noticed that when you're in conversation with some people, you feel numb, you feel joyless, you feel drained, you feel oppressed, you feel, as I said in the beginning, like you're locked into a conversation? In the Gnostic tradition, there are Archons, and they were created by the Demiurge. The Gnostic tradition is multiple traditions, okay? In some traditions, it works like this. The Archon means lord, king, ruler. It's the same root as a monarchy. Monarchy is a rule by one. Mono is one, archy is ruler. So these Archons are rulers. Some Gnostic traditions would say there are 7 major Archons that go with, they have 7 planetary alignments and 7 deadly sins. And they bring these sins and this sinfulness into the world in a way to provoke and then harvest human suffering. Maybe. You're sat there thinking, this is weird. I wonder if this guy believes this. And I psychically read your thought. And my answer was, maybe. Maybe this isn't a bad model of the world. I don't know. Maybe something like this is happening. Archons interfere with real humans. They interfere with entities that have actual authentic light within them, that are the creatures not of this lesser god, but the creatures of a greater god. So in most Gnostic traditions, there would be an actual god, but he's away from here, very, very far away, physically, metaphysically, metaphorically. And if you said to a Gnostic teacher, like, where is he? They would say above and beyond the firmament. What's the firmament? You're going to have to look that one up. There's a different cosmology, there's a different map of reality that they used to have in these times. Archons, it is said, are, as they're a product of a lesser god, a god who had the mechanical and scientific power to create a world and all of the intelligence and all of the knowledge, but none of the wisdom and none of the spiritual fluidity to really breathe life into all of his creation. He kind of had to steal it, to subjugate it, to smuggle it, to exploit authentic life that he didn't create from another realm. What can he do? He can replicate, and his creatures can replicate what he can do. So the Demiurge is, some traditions will be called Yaldabaoth, doesn't, whatever. Just imagine like sort of an evil god, or a really intelligent but not good god. Not necessarily evil maybe, but just not good. He's not wise. And he creates lords of the earth to help him rule. They're called Archons. They are not capable of creative thought. And they loathe humans because humans have authentic light trapped inside of them. And we are capable of creativity. We are capable of creative thought. They can replicate. They have a machine-like artificial intelligence ability to replicate original thought and original thinking, but they can't spontaneously create it. They have no spark. They have no inspiration. The inspiration is the breathing in. So they don't have the breath, the spark of life within them. They're sort of like robot reptile machines. They can copy, they can influence, they can exploit, but they can't create. They're not creative creatures. And they interfere with human endeavors to create more sin, in the world, to create more suffering, to create more misunderstanding, more ignorance, more violence, more exploitation, more of an expression of our baser desires that keeps us focused in the flesh, focused in the material world, focused in consumption, focused in the body, all of the things that corrupt and die and, you know, are of the matrix, are of the simulation itself, instead of being focused on the broader spiritual questions and the good God that lies beyond. Archons can't create, they can interfere though. So sometimes you'll have heard me over the last 5 or 6 years, as I've gotten more and more interested in this, talking about archontic, jokingly referring to archontic interference. So sometimes when I'm trying to do something that could actually genuinely help people, and then randomly I'm stopped in doing it, or could genuinely help me, and then randomly I'm stopped in doing it, I laugh and say, oh, the Archons are at it again, because they don't want an evolution of human consciousness, because the evolution of human consciousness leads to gnosis, the enlightenment, the Satori, the enlightenment that takes us out of the wheel of karma. So you have the Gnostic worldview, which is that you're trapped in the material world of Yaldabaoth, and in the far Eastern worldview, Southeast Asian worldview, you have the wheel of karma, and that is also fulfills the same function. It's the material world. It's here, the flesh, the things of this world, that which you can touch, that which seems to be ultimate reality. So when we study physics, we go, well, this is reality. And then we say, well, we want to study the essence of the really real reality. So intelligent people came along and went, well, then you can't just study a rock and what happens when you throw a rock and how fast the rock flies and how quickly it slows down when it lands and the effect of gravity on the rock. You then need to study the components of the rock. And then you have to study the components of the components of the components of the rock. And physicists, those who study the physical realm, break it down and break it down and break it down, trying to find a raw pixel in the simulation. These are called quanta. And that type of physics is called quantum physics. They're trying to find the essence of reality. Ironically enough, when they go through the material world trying to find the essence of reality, what everybody knows, like there's been so many books written about this over the last 25 years now, is it becomes more and more spiritual. When you're reading the rules and laws of quantum physics, that which they know up to now, some of it you can't distinguish from the Bhagavad Gita. Like they overlap as to their, because they're both are engaged in the same endeavor. These are still human beings engaged in the endeavor of trying to answer the question of what is the essential nature of this reality? What's the pixel? Show us a pixel. Show us the pixel that makes up the semblance of this reality. Now, quantum physics says the same thing. There isn't actually a rock. Not at the quantum level. Not at the quantum level. There's no rock. There's the semblance of a rock. So then in a way they end up becoming like social constructionists. They're like, no, we socially, as humans, as a tribe, agree that that's a rock and it may function as a rock, but its essential nature beyond its appearance as a rock is not a rock. And you go, what is this weird, mystical, babbly bullshit? You're supposed to be a scientist. And they're kind of embarrassed. They're like, but it isn't. The essential essence of what is rock is no different from the essential essence of what is hand, is no different from the essential essence of what is mountain, of what is sea, and what is bird, and what is star, when you get down to the quantum level. Coming back to ego, and why this is important. When you're talking to somebody and you're numb, and you're like, my God, this is so boring, it's driving me mad, I think that you're talking to somebody who's tuned into an archontic frequency. They've been hit, I'm not saying that they are. I'm saying that one could, let me be careful with my words, one could think of this as an interesting alternative metaphor, is to say these are people who are now tuned into an archontic frequency. So they're purely about the material world because they literally worship the creation of their master, Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, who created this world. And he's an angry, narcissistic, psychopathic, sadistic, not at peace with himself, demigod, not a true god, like they call him the Demiurge. And he's jealous. This is a jealous god. This is a vengeful god. This is a wrathful god. This is an ill-tempered god. He wants sacrifice. He wants for you to abase yourself. He wants you to kneel and scrape and beg and sacrifice your children and so on and so forth. So in the Gnostic tradition, and why it became so, what do you call it, like controversial, dangerous and threatening, is because this was huge. This was huge. Your witch trials that we're all told, oh, they were burning witches because witches were healing people. I saw a group of eco-feminists on Instagram. It was a viral Instagram post. There's an Indian ecofeminist, and she was talking about the witch trials of Europe. And she was saying, oh, the witches, they were tortured and burned to death because the witches across Europe were teaching women how to return to nature and how to be close to nature. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. To pull the old Zizek Uno card out, what if the opposite were true? They were actually teaching the denial of this world, not the acceptance and love of nature, not the harmony with nature, not that Gnostics exploit nature or want to damage nature. There's no tradition that says that, but you should be indifferent to nature because nature is matter. It's the material world, and it's all false. It's all the creation of the Demiurge, of Yaldabaoth. I believe that those women and men, there was literally thousands of men and women, were burnt as witches. These were Gnostics. And they were a huge threat and a huge problem to the power of the various churches of the day, because they had the church was offering a dogmatic ideology, and the Gnostics, and you have like the Bogomils, I used to know how to say this in Bosnian, the good Bosnians. Fuck, I can't remember how to say it. There's a big tradition in Central Europe, all the way through to France and Germany, throughout the whole of the Balkans, Bulgaria, Bosnia, Serbia, all these areas, Croatia had all of this, of Gnosticism. These are all Gnostic. They're different schools and they believe slightly different things, but they're all Gnostics. It's hugely threatening. These are people who didn't want to be in this world. They were true mystics. They were truly of another world. Some of the Bogomils, which proliferated in Bulgaria, but the name is because of the Slavic root. I'm going to screw this up. The Slavic root word for God in Russia and in a lot of Slavic languages is Bog, and I think it means beloved by God. And some of them even didn't want to procreate. So you had Roman Church Christians, because the Romans won that ultimately, saying, no, you should go forth and multiply because we need more tax-paying slaves. And the Bogomils, just one of the groups, not all of the Gnostic groups believed in this. Some of the Bogomils were saying, no more children. You're only trapping light in flesh. And their sexual practices reflected that. So in order to not have children, but to still satiate their sexual needs, because these are men and women who were horny, they would only have sex in a way, and this is important because you'll hear deceptive versions of this. They would only have oral. Some of them would either have no sex, or they would engage solely in oral and anal sex where there was no possibility of pregnancy. That was called sodomy. We think nowadays of sodomy as being solely anal sex. Sodomy is actually any quote-unquote degenerate sexual practice in accordance to the church, and it refers back to Sodom and Gomorrah. You remember that famous story? They say to the woman, don't look back, and then she looks back and she's turned into a pillar of salt. I revisited that story as an adult because I remember it from when I was a kid being taught that story. There's an angel that comes down to heaven, and in that story, the people of Sodom are such lunatics who are just rotting all the time. The angels hide in a house, and the people of the city haven't had sex with an angel. So they hammer on the door of the house and say, bring the angels down to us so that we may know them. Well, knowing somebody in the biblical sense is to have sex with them. These lunatics were banging on the door saying, have you got angels in there? Send them down here. We've never had sex with angels. We'd like to have sex with them. God was not happy about that at all. So that's sodomy. That's sodomy. Coming back to ego, the unconscious, and the shadow. Through the Gnostics, through the Gnostic perspective of the world. There is a huge threat here to this worldview. Imagine, forget Gnosticism for a second, you'd be like, I can't embrace an idea of Yaldabaoth, and who does Yaldabaoth? He's like a lion-headed, snake-tailed demigod who has sex with Sophia, the essence of knowledge itself, and it's like the mythology is psychological, it's philosophical, it's a metaphor, as a warning for many things, but one of them is like the way in which we misuse knowledge without wisdom as one of the warnings. You can spawn a whole world full of sin and suffering. It's like a Rick and Morty episode. Accidentally, through a scientific experiment, spunking out a whole ecosystem of a world that should never have been made, that's now on your conscience, that's now on your karma, because you were not careful with what you were doing. So in the various mythologies, there's a lot of like hubris and pride and not listening to God and not listening to higher morality in order to just create things that then have terrible consequences. Different story, different day. Imagine you don't like that, but it's lingering in the ether around your head right now. You are aware of the Matrix. You are aware of the idea that we're living inside of a simulation. What a threatening idea to, well, the Roman Church isn't in charge of everything now, but they are still the largest real estate owners on the earth. But to a corporate capitalist system, which is capital, is material. There's no such thing as capital that isn't material. You can't be like, oh, I have 1,000 hours of meditation banked. Your bank doesn't give a shit about that. Your accountant doesn't care about that. It's useless to capitalism because it only cares about stuff. Capitalism is of the material world, right? The church needed its, they weren't called taxes, whatever. The church needed whatever its version was of taxes. It's past midnight here, I can't remember. We need slaves. The system eats people. The system is the Matrix, and it has been always. The human system that we've created, once we stop being hunter-gatherers, once we stop being innocent and just having sex and then seeing a rabbit and killing it and eating it and seeing some fruit and some vegetables and killing fruit and killing vegetables. Wow, I am tired. I am tired. Yeah, okay. Just living off the land innocently. My suspicion, I don't want to diverge again, but I actually think this is the story of Adam and Eve has way more to do with human evolution than anything else. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So we're in a state of capitalism. We're in a state where I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm against rampant cronyism, corporatism, and consumer capitalism, because that literally functions on human suffering. It's all based on our context principles. So when you talk to somebody who's in that state, who's very into the material, who's very ego-based, because in order to be invested in this world, you should be invested in this world as a consumer of things, of people, of the system. It would be very threatening, just to close the loop on my earlier point, if we all embraced an idea that this was just a simulation, that this wasn't actually the real world, but there was a real world, and that we could invest in that real world and our place in that real world with our love of God and our love of truth and our love of love and our love of worship and our reverence for life, starting to sound very much like the early Christian movement. The early Christian movement were Jews. They weren't Jews, they were Christians. They were Jews who followed a rabbi called Jesus, who is called rabbi in the Bible. Yes, Christian followers, your beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus is a Jewish, Palestinian, Arab rabbi. They were Jews. They were Arab Jews. The first Christians are. Semitic means Arab. Semitic is not a description of an ethnicity, it's a description of a language. They were Semitic Jews. And they were terrifying. These are breakaway Jews. These are real. So there were already multiple rebel Jews, and they were highly religious, mystical people living their Jewish faith, and they were prepared to kill and die and be tortured to death, fighting their enemies, fighting against Roman oppression. They were a real threat. This is why Jesus was killed. But Jesus wasn't special in that mythology. Jesus was one of many people who was a rabble-rouser, who was claiming to be the Messiah. The life of Brian has probably got one of the truest depictions of what was going on at the time of Jesus. I don't think it's shown in any other film. Tons of people were trying to be the Messiah. It is known. Tons of people were trying to fulfill the prophecy of the Jews that existed at the time, that a Messiah was coming that would lead them out of bondage, that would lead them out of the shitty situation that they were in. So Jesus is thrown into that mill. That mill is already there. The executions were already happening. These are extremely threatening people, though. From Jesus forward, that was really, really threatening, because, and there's a niche of people who are interested in Gnosticism and interested in early Christian history, who believe that actually Jesus, the historical man, was teaching a very Gnostic version of religion, which you cannot have. I don't know of a more threatening religious perspective than Gnosticism to any establishment, to anything in the world. No dogma can survive in the face of Gnosticism. There's no dogma that can survive in the face of Gnosticism. You cannot compel people to do dumb shit if you're using Gnosticism to do it. You can't compel them to genitally mutilate their female or male children. You can't compel them to torture foreigners. You can't compel them to give you taxes so that you can build machines that torture more foreigners or whatever else. You can't do it with Gnosticism. You can't dominate people with Gnosticism. If you teach people to have, because Gnosis is direct, it's subjective. Nobody in a Gnostic tradition can say, I, Richard Grannon, have achieved Gnosis, and I don't know, like, give me your money so I can buy a fleet of sports cars and give me whatever I want materially. Because then you'd look at me and you'd be like, you just said you're not interested in the material world. My only job in that tradition, which I'm not in that tradition, I'm just interested, would be to lead you to Gnosis. So it's useless. It's useless for any archontic personality types, lords, rulers, those who wish to parasitically feed on the work of others. It's not just useless, it's an absolute bloody threat. It's a weapon. It's a powerful weapon. When people are very ego invested, you'll notice they're also very invested in this world. They're very invested in their status, their symbolic status in the world. They're very much about symbols. They're very much about language. They're very much about titles and access and networks and all of this kind of thing. The Gnostic experience of reality is back to the original Christ-like teachings. There's no churches to Christ. Christ wasn't interested in churches. Christ said, wherever you meet, if you meet in faith, if you meet in love, if you meet as people who follow me, and you love each other and you're kind to each other, God's there. That's a church. Wherever. Do we need a building, Lord? Nah, you don't need a building. You don't need a building. We don't trade in the temples. We know what Jesus did with moneylenders in temples. It's the only violent episode. It's the only episode we have today. If you go to the Gnostic Gospels, you'll see other violent episodes. And if you're interested in Gnosticism now, hopefully I've given you some of an interest in Gnosticism, you can go read the Gnostic Gospels. And you'll see how Gnostic. In the Gnostic Gospels, you will see a Gnostic Jesus. The Gnostic Jesus says cool things like, my favorite Jesus quote is from the Gospel of Thomas, which never made it in. Never got through the Council of Nicaea because it's useless to those who want to collect taxes and because it's a huge threat, where Jesus says, that which is left within you will destroy you. That which is brought forth from you will save you. These are ideas that empower the individual, not the state, not the church, not the establishment, not the machine, but the human. The implication here is there is a potential inside of you that is destroying you because it's locked within you. But if you access and tap that potential, you will know salvation. I can't profit from that. How do I tax that? No, you're a sinner. You're a dirty, you were born in sin. Sinny, sin, sinifer. Now, if you come to my church every Sunday and give me money, I can do a and you also spin around going and then you're absolved of sin. It's a mummer's farce. It's quackery. It's pure quackery. It's a money-making scheme. That's why they did it. But if I say to you, no, it's all of it is within you. It's like it's your relationship with yourself, which if you can transcend your attachment to the material world, sounds like Buddhism. If you can transcend your attachment to the material world, will become your most direct experience with God. There is also a Jewish mystical tradition that teaches this, but we'll leave that for another day. That your experience, your communication with a self, with an ego that has lost its attachments to the material world, becomes the most intense, the most psychedelic, meaning mind expanding, the most direct and mystical experience of God. Because the essence of the self is not archontic. It's not of the material world. The essence of an inspired, authentic, alive self comes from that other dimension, that real God, that is not here, that is not in the realm of Yaldabaoth, not in the realm of the Archons and the Demiurge. Sometimes when you're talking to somebody, they're very, very materially invested. And I don't mean, oh, they're just into money. They're into life and death, birth and death. They're into, I've only got my 75 years, I'm frightened, I fear sickness and death, I fear being forgotten, I fear my own insignificance. So they go, oh, I want to buy a house. I went through this period where I watched my uncles and turn from their 20s to their 30s and 40s, and the conversation shift to carpets and sheds and mortgages. And I was like, God, you guys got fucking boring, man. Because they became more and more invested in this material world, which makes you egotistical. So aggressive, harsh, exploitative egotism that creates narcissism that I would normally talk about. I'm talking about the egotism of blindness, where you're just blind. You don't even see yourself. Everything is stuck in the unconscious. Everything is stuck in shadow. You're frustrated and you can't find that authentic spark because now it's layered down under layers and layers of intergenerational trauma, intergenerational expectation, intergenerational habitual patterns of behavior, just dumb stuff that humans learn to do. Well, we always go ooga booga on a Wednesday night. We always clap the NHS on a Thursday night. When we walk past the tree, oh, we worship the tree. Why? Well, we always did. And the safest thing for us to do in a high threat, low resource environment is just keep doing the stuff that our ancestors did. That's why we copy each other. When we copy each other, we're behaving archontically because the archons have no original thought. But it's also keeping us safe. So fear and pain keeps us in the material. It keeps us in the body. It keeps us in this world. It keeps us in Yaldabaoth's world. It keeps us stuck. And we go, oh, it's all going to run out. What's going to happen to me? How long have I got left? Maybe I could buy a bigger house and prove to people that I'm better, or whatever the fucking weird archontic inspired fantasy is. Back to the beginning. The beginning was the word. No, I'm joking. So I said there's a denial and then there's a story. Watch this in yourself. If you don't want to be shadow possessed, tell the truth. If you don't want to be shadow possessed, tell the truth to yourself. If you like something, don't deny that you like it. If you don't like something, don't deny that you don't like it. Admit it to yourself. Try and admit it to others if you can. When I say that the exercise I have on emotional literacy, that nobody wants to do, is the best shadow work you can do, it's because you will unlock the channel, the bridge between you and your unconscious. You'll acknowledge it through your feelings. not through words, because the unconscious can't talk. It doesn't do language. It does symbols, it does somatic feelings, and it does emotions. That's why your dreams are strange. Your dreams, the ones that you remember, because I personally believe we can dream just in pure feelings, with no visual or auditory or anything. But the films that you remember, the movies, the edited movies that you remember, and you go, oh, I had a dream, and I wore a blue t-shirt, and I was on a gondola, and I was in, you know, Sri Lanka. I think that's your unconscious trying to take the feelings and the instincts and the impulses and give them color and light and magic to show you, so that you can symbolically interpret it and go, oh, that's what it needs. But if your communication with your unconscious is tight and regular and open and authentic, you won't need that. You won't need strange, bewildering dreams that you go and bore your friends at work with, who don't know it, who have no fucking idea how to interpret it anyway. Also watch for denial. Also watch for big investment in story. Highly archontic, highly ego, material focused people are big on no. No, and they're rigid. They're rigid, and that sometimes I think is when you're with somebody who's very rigid and they're talking to you or they're talking at you and they're beating you over the head with the story of who they are. You got to see, the thing about me is, do you feel that? Do you feel that? How's that fit? Do you want to hear what I'm going to say next? Now, come here. See, listen, mate, the thing about me, just like the thing about me, the thing, the way I am, right? And let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I'm the kind of guy I'm the kind of guy who's always gonna, I'm never, you know, I'm like that guy. Does that feel good? Do you want that conversation? Does that let you open and just be and explore the potential possibilities of who you could be? No, because now you're a dildo. Now you're my dildo that I'm rogering myself with. You see, because let me tell you something. Let me just hold your consciousness down and just shove who my dumb impersonation, this dumb story I've created, this egomaniacal story I've created of myself is on you. What for? What for? Like, nobody wants to hear that, man. Nobody wants to hear that. So there's a denial. No, I don't do that. Watch for that in yourself. I do this when I'm driving. I'm terrible when I'm driving. I'm like, they fucked up. I'm like, probably also you. And I'm, nope. Well, now see, if you're really saying no, that means you're a perfect driver. No, it doesn't. That means that they fucked up. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe you also are driving a vehicle kind of fast. Maybe you had, you know, and I'm trying to work, like, so it's like with massage, you know, they massage you and they find like a knot and you got to grind it. It hurts. But if you keep pushing, you're like, okay, all right, yeah, that's probably not quite right. That's probably not quite true. Let me just deal with that a second. Watch where you see a denial. Watch where you get heavily invested in a story. No, especially a story of yourself. Your memories, my God. I suggested recently on a YouTube video on my main channel that our memories are fallible. People went berserk. I was like, you egomaniacs. You egomaniacs. You really believe that your memories are infallible? Seriously? Is this how? No wonder everybody's stressed and depressed. People are walking around going, what I think inside of here is an accurate representation of the world. Wow, no wonder life sucks for you. No wonder you're full of this heavy grey archontic energy. I just let it go. Maybe it's because I took too many psychedelics as a kid. Maybe everybody needs to take psychedelics, or at least meditate and do breath work and listen to psychedelic music. The way I see it is I'm like, no, it's not that all my memories are gibberish, but I know I did psychology experiments at university. They made me do them because in order to get the grades, it wasn't like a weird thing where they're like, you have to do this with a gun to my head, but to get the grades. And I saw firsthand experiments where we could put memories inside of people's heads, intelligent people, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, You can literally put a false memory of not of something that happened 10 years ago, where it's a bit dodgy anyway, of something that just happened a minute before. So you can have an event that happens like 60 seconds earlier, and then you can run a process on somebody and insert a completely false memory with a fairly high degree of accuracy and a fairly high degree of effectiveness in less than 30 seconds. There's no way that my childhood memories are accurate. There's no way that your childhood memories are accurate. Doesn't mean they're meaningless. It doesn't mean you don't remember anything or you're stupid. But you shouldn't be attached, man. Don't be attached to your stories. We're vessels. We're vessels of experience. This might not be the only reality we're tuned into. We might literally be living multiple lives at the same time. And our consciousness, well, we might have multiple split consciousnesses across multiple timelines, but they're connected. And there's a nexus point where they meet. And sometimes when you sleep, maybe you access it. I don't know if I've had it a few times where I wake up and I'm like, I'm sure I was just in another life. I'm sure I was just in another body. I'll wake up from a dream and I'll be like, oh, I'm in this one. And I'll be like, what do you mean? No, nothing. Well, no, you said you were in this one. What do you mean this one? What's the other one? La, 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 I can't remember. Would you like a coffee? I just get on with my day. I think it's much more fluid. Much, much more fluid than that. When people get stuck in their ego and a lot of the stuff of their life is disavowed and goes into the unconscious, they become barely bearable as human beings. And they make the most absurd choices and the worst decisions imaginable. They're hard to be around. And they fuck up. They destroy their own lives. Why? Because they've become robotic. They've become archontic. That's like a Clockwork Orange. Do you remember the Anthony Burgess book that Stanley Kubrick made into a film? Clockwork Orange. I only found this out years later, like maybe 5 years ago I found this out. It's Anthony Burgess was in Malaysia, and he was a teacher there, and he knew Malay words. Clockwork Orange is a play on a Malay word for man, which is orang. The Malay word for man is orang. That's where we get orangutan. An orangutan is a man of the woods. Orang-hutan. Hutan is the woods. Orang-hutan. Clockwork Orange. That's what a lot of people are. You walk out in the street, you talk to people, they're talking to each other. I've noticed the longer people practice this, like the older they get. Sometimes when people are like, not everybody, some people are still alive, they're still flowing, you know, and they flow and they're still in the moment, they're still in this reality. With some people, I think it becomes protective. It's that no, it's that denial. They have protective layers and they've been practicing it for years. And I literally have found myself falling asleep while people are talking to me. And I really struggle to sleep. I'm like looking at them going, yeah, yeah, and then I like access one of my other realities. What? Who's that? What? Who? What? Oh yeah. What did your boss at work say to you? Wow. You're repeating yourself. They repeat themselves. They don't know. It's a machine that's stuck in these badly written, coded programs that just goes meow, 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 and it feels the same feeling. Very little. There's not much feeling there at all. Little bursts of feeling, little bursts of emotion, and then it gets stuck in this cyclical thing. Fuck, 50 minutes. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Thank you for offering me your consciousness for 50 minutes. This is supposed to take half an hour and I didn't even cover half of what I was going to talk about. Okay, let's wrap it up. I'll cover this in another video. I'll cover the rest in another video. Be aware of these things when you want to individuate, when you want to integrate your unconscious, when you want to integrate your shadow. Actually, you know what? I'm not sorry. Some of these concepts, they took me years to wrap my head around, and I can't just make them like, here's the 5 things about the Archons that you need to know. The Narcons. That's what we'll call the Narcissistic Archons from now on. The Narcons. It's actually, I came up with that with Richard Willett years ago. Film director Richard Willett. So, here's what you should take away from this video. The more egocentric, unconscious, shadow activated parts of the self will be deeply invested in no, will be deeply invested in a stubborn rigidity. Watch for that in yourself and in others. And story, big on story. Stories are great, stories are beautiful, but stories should be allowed like to flow like music and poetry, and they come and go. If you're rigidly attached to a story, like if you are saying, like if you challenge somebody's story and they become violent or emotional, you're really into egomania. You're really into a kind of, that is, by psychoanalytic theory, that's a narcissistic defense. You're attacking my story, but I'm so attached to my story that you're attacking me. This is not good. This is not good. We should be open and free and flowing. The broader point that I dare to make here, because I don't really like talking like spiritual stuff and you should meditate and you should do this or you should do that. You should do whatever you want. Like, I don't really care. People, what they put their consciousness to is frankly their business. Unless they're saying to me, I want to recover from narcissistic abuse. I'm like, okay, you have to do this. One little thing though that I would say. If you can take your mind to a place regularly where you consider the possibility that this world isn't really real in the realist sense that we as adults are all walking around pretending about it. And just bear in mind, you can do simulation theory. Simulation theory is respected, by the way, in philosophy. It's not considered nonsense. Simulation theory. There's also quantum physics. Quantum physics is absolute wrong. Okay, it's criticized. It's largely respected. So the simulation theory, fairly well respected. Quantum physics, absolutely, it's respected. There are critics of quantum physics, of course. But even like, that's hard science. Well, even hard science is saying this reality is not reality as such and as it is. Of course it's not. Like, we're giving, we, the humans, are supplying meaning. We're supplying the function and the meaning to these things. If we choose not to, or if I give everybody high enough doses of a psychedelic, the thing, like, you can't drive. Your car key isn't a car key anymore. Your car isn't a car anymore. Your house isn't a house anymore, not as you know it. These things, if you've taken like a high dosage of LSD, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Everything just starts echoing. And you're like, well, there can't be a car, because there can't be a key. And even if there was, where the fuck are we going to go? Like, that's where your brain goes to. And everything that is immediately here, immediately in your environment, takes on the most amount of meaning. And everything that is symbolic and away from you loses any meaning. If you're on a high enough dose, you can't attach meaning to anything that is not present at all. So it kind of, you could say in a certain sense, it sort of forces that Satori Zen moment onto you because you're purely here. You're purely based in this environment. It's very difficult to move beyond, but you'll see, what did that poet say? You'll see, an entire world, or worlds within a grain of sand, or whatever he said. That was a British poet. You should know that. You show some goddamn patriotism. To what? To a nation. What's a nation? Don't need nations on acid. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope that was useful, and if not useful, at least interesting. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon, where I will wrap up the bits of that I didn't cover fully. Thanks.